What's the best way you've seen someone rebel against school rules? Story 1. Jerk teachers like this are the worst. So we had a substitute one day in 7th grade English, and she had us make decorative name tags so she knew how to address us. She asked us to write one phrase that described us under our names, for example, horse girl or health nut. One boy on the lacrosse team wrote lax bro. She asked him if that was a swear. He laughed because it was a funny question and said no. She took his laughing as proof that he was lying and ordered him to make a new name tag. He said no because it wasn't a swear and he was following the rules. She got so angry she called the head office to prove him wrong and surely get him a detention. The way her face fell when he heard the principal tell her through the phone that it wasn't a swear was priceless. By then, she'd wasted about 20 minutes of class on this one endeavor. She ignored him the rest of the class but didn't skimp out on the nasty glares. Some people are just way too far up into themselves. Story 2. Something like that happened in my school with a substitute teacher asking a burned child to get his mask off. He had several burn scars on his visage and was wearing different masks every day, making it cool stuff. Some with drawings on it, some with matte colors, and some with whiteboard material, making it possible for people to draw on it, just erase it. It was pretty cool. Because it was, quote, distracting and wearing a mask in school shouldn't be allowed no matter the circumstance, unquote. Yeah, so when he started crying because he didn't want to and the sub said he would have to if he wanted to follow her course. One of his friends said, if he can't follow the class with his mask on, I will not either, and walked out of the class with him. Then the whole class walked off too. And then when the word was passed to the whole school, no one in the class that had her showed up at her course. She got fired too. Story 3. I was at a private school that had rules about the length of boys' hair. One guy in particular always ignored the rule, and the administration would tell him to get a haircut every so often, but he never did. Eventually, when his hair got about down to his shoulders, the principal pulled him aside and told him his hair was twice the allowed length, and by next week it needed to be shortened by half. So Monday rolls around and he comes in with half his head shaved and the other side as long as ever. We were impressed by the literal interpretation of the principal's request, but it still ended up with him getting a suspension for a week, and he had to shave the other side before he could come back. Story 4. A buddy of mine was caught messing with his phone during class. Back then, the school rules were that if you were caught, your phone was confiscated for an entire day, and you couldn't get it back until the next day. This was before smartphones, and the rules have changed since the 10 years that I graduated there. So my buddy hands in his phone but doesn't seem to worry about it. He waits for a couple of classes until lunch break and asks me to come with him. He's going to get his phone back. We go to the staff room where the confiscated phones were held and ask a teacher there if he could copy down a phone number into my phone so he could call his dad later that day. The teacher agrees and gives him the phone. I hand him mine and we wait for him to copy the number. When he's done, he gives me mine back and sticks his own phone in his pocket. He was known as a bit of a joker, so when he jokingly said, "Well, thanks a lot, see ya," the teacher immediately laughs, tells him to stop messing about and to give the phone back. Laughing and joking about being caught, he does. But not really. See, he had a second phone, exact same model, except this one was broken. Wouldn't charge anymore, he said. So when he stuck his good phone in his pocket, it was right next to the broken one. When the teacher made him give back the phone, he just gave him back the broken one. It was the best switcheroo I've ever seen in my time at that school. He was so fluent, so nonchalant about the whole thing. It was amazing to see. Story 5. Halloween costumes were banned at my high school because some idiots like 10 years ago before dressed up and used it as an excuse to hide their faces while they vandalized the school. In my senior year, more than half of the class decided that we would still dress up and march into the school together in the morning. We all knew we would be punished right away, but it didn't matter. I stayed up all night making a suit of armor out of metallic duct tape and cardboard, along with a broomstick horse to ride. The next day, we all gathered in the parking lot and waited for everyone to show up. People went all out, and there were a lot of amazing costumes, and after about 20 minutes of waiting, we started our march. The deans had learned of our plan and were waiting for us right as we entered. They started pulling people aside in groups and taking student ideas to hand out detentions. In my group, there was one guy dressed up as an ATM, and when the dean asked for his ID, he started making ATM noises and then slipped the ID out through the slot where you would put your debit card in. It was one of the funniest things, and I was so jealous that my costume was not as clever as his. Even though having so many of us participate was pretty awesome, his costume just made that whole event for me. Story 6. We had an awful Spanish teacher in middle school who collectively punished the class by making us write the same sentence 100 times over in detention. On one of these occasions, my friend and I asked her if we could type our detention in the computer lab, and this was when computers in schools were a new thing, so we could improve our, quote, typing speed, and she said yes. Anyway, we didn't do much typing, but did learn how to write a basic program that printed the same line 100 times over. Update, because this blew up, we didn't copy-paste because a computer teacher took this as a teachable moment and/or an opportunity for malicious compliance, and showed us how to do rudimentary programming instead of cheating our way through it. Also, I'm not sure if copy-paste had been invented yet. Story 7. So when I was in high school, there was a rule implemented that if you showed up late to school, you had to go to the front office to get a detention slip. You would then have to give it to the teacher for that period, who would then mark it down, and you were required to go to lunch detention for that day. I figured out by the third slip that literally no one cared, teachers, security, or students. So when I was subsequently late for the rest of the year, I would take out an old slip that I had from a previous detention, walk through the school, give it to my teacher to mark down, and then take it back to give to the lunch detention supervisor. But I never went to detention because the front office didn't have a record of me being late. I was late no less than 50 times my senior year, only having been reprimanded the initial 3 times. I even told my parents about it after I had graduated, and even they agreed it was dumb and funny. Story 8. When I was in grade 7, our last class of the day, students would always bring in snacks. Our lunch shift was way too early in the day, so by the end of the school day, we'd all be feeling pretty hungry. And we were all told by our teacher that if we didn't have enough to share, we couldn't eat it in the classroom. One day, almost all of us brought in enough food to share, even with the students that didn't bring anything in. We even synchronized the times that we pulled all of our food out. Our teacher was clueless. She had no idea what to tell us. There wasn't any school-wide no food in classrooms rule, so she couldn't run to the principal. Finally, she gave in to our malicious compliance and allowed us to share food for the rest of the period. Story 9. This was prior to smartphones, circa 2002. One of my classmates was a regular class clown. He would buy brownies in the cafeteria, roll them up in his hand so they looked like a convincing piece of poop. He would then do all sorts of antics with his poop. Put it on seats, throw it at people, what have you. Obviously, the school staff caught on and he got in trouble. This guy didn't go quietly, though. He was required to sit alone at lunch for the entire school year. There were months left before summer. The one teacher who made sure his punishment was severe made regular rounds of the lunchroom to maintain order. She would pass his lone seat during her rounds, and one day he made another very convincing pastry-sourced poop and had it ready for her when she passed. The entire lunchroom was watching out of the corner of their eyes while maintaining an alibi conversation with the people close to them. When she passed, he stood up and snuck behind her and slipped the pastry poop in her purse that she was carrying on her shoulder, and he quickly ran back to his seat. The lunchroom burst into laughter, and the teacher had no idea why. Until later, of course, the dude was an artist at rebellion. Story 10. We had vending machines outside the buildings, but due to some asshat vandalizing them, this understandably pissed the school board off. So the machines were put off limits but could not be powered down due to some kind of contractual obligation of constant availability. In an effort to combat that, faculty were posted at the machines during class changes to prevent purchases. But thankfully, no one was posted at the machines during class time. Mind you, this is like the 1997 to 1999 era. We weren't happy, as that was our sole source of caffeine on campus. We decided to heck with that and made purchases during class. I, being the lithe, tiny guy I was conscripted to be the buyer. While the teacher was either out of the room or indisposed, or let's be honest, intentionally distracted, I would collect cash and requests 4 at a time and hop out the emergency escape window that they had opted to not have an alarm on and walk about 20 feet to the soda machine and make my purchases. This went on for some time until the drink companies lambasted the school board for not restocking their dwindling supplies, allegedly as per contract. They put 2 and 2 together and realized that purchases were still being made. Apparently, I was not the only gopher, and lifted the ban on my last year. Story 11. So I went to high school in South Texas, an area in which it almost never snows. For me, this doesn't mean anything, but I have lived in most of the North for my life, so I know what it's like to play in the snow. However, somehow it ended up snowing overnight, and by snow, I mean like what snow looked like in the North Deep and not just thin and watery. These were immensely heavy flakes. We were all sure that they would cancel school because Texas does not have salt machines or snow plows and the roads were super slick. A lot of parents didn't want their kids to go to school because they didn't feel comfortable with a bunch of new high school drivers on ice. Yet, alas, they of course did not cancel school. A little rain knocks out our whole district, but a foot of snow? Nothing. My mother made us take the bus because although she felt comfortable driving in snow being from Illinois, Texas drivers are more aggressive and the roads weren't properly cleared. So I took the bus and it was like being on a safari tour. Kids were taking pictures of the icicles on trees and all wide-eyed. It was funny. Once we got to school though, the campus looked like a war zone. No one would go inside and had instead resorted to snowball fights on the entire campus and parking lots. Once the bell rang, of course, no one went inside. I watched from the window as the vice principal went to the front of the school, commanded the kids inside, and of course getting nailed in his bald head by snowballs. He finally managed to round up the rogue kids and we all went about the first period. I had a relaxed teacher who knew no one would pay attention. Since half the class was missing anyway, she let us act out the Civil War with snowballs and took us outside. While we were playing outside, we all paused as we heard the fire alarm go off. The school came pouring out for the next 2 periods. The dude that pulled the fire alarm is a legend and lives on at our school to this day. He did in fact get arrested, along with another kid that thought it'd be smart to throw ice at a cop. That was the one time I saw the high school completely not have a handle on anyone. Story 12. It's not really a rebellion against the rules, but a good friend of mine had a special talent to make teachers like him, despite having no respect for the actual school system. He used to study on his own to ace the tests, rarely showed up to classes he didn't like, and still got perfect report cards with high praise from all the teachers. The height of it was when he convinced his homeroom teacher to come to pick him up from the beach before an important test. He eventually went on to have a great military career, but if he ever gets into politics, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow managed to convince everyone that world domination under his rule was their idea. Story 13. So we had this dude, Kyle. His name is not Kyle, but he absolutely had Kyle energy, trademarked. He looked like a typical low-income stoner kid with long hair, ripped clothes and jeans, beat-up shoes, beanies, and socks with weed stuff on them. Now, Kyle was a peculiar kind of kid who spent half his time in detention, rarely ever showed up to tests, and when he did, he would just kind of sleep through them. He was pretty rambunctious and kind of funny, but ultimately was one of the troubled children. He was a quote-unquote low flyer, as the assistant principal called him when we talked, since I was also a low flyer. That meant he got in trouble, but nothing serious like drugs or fighting, though everyone thought or knew he was a pothead. One of my all-time favorite stories of Kyle was in our world history class. The teacher absolutely hated him. They always got into it, and honestly, the man would talk very patronizingly to Kyle, and the dude snapped back. Our teacher said, "Get out, now." Kyle proceeded to go to the other side of the room from the door. When the teacher asked him what he was doing, he yelled, "Getting my backpack and getting out." There were kind of like cubbies for our bags by the windows, so Kyle grabs his packs it up, and straight yeets it out the window. What follows is the teacher yelling, "What are you doing?" and Kyle screaming out, "I'm getting out," followed by him dolphin diving out the window. It was surreal. Kyle was suspended, came back a few weeks later, did some more, was suspended again, came back, and was finally expelled. The dude is seemingly doing okay the last time I Facebooked and stalked him, works at a Chili's now. Here are some more stories about the adventures of Kyle, thusly the Chronicles of Kyle. The kid ate a raw cup of ramen, whole. No, I don't think I explained it properly though. He ate the entire cup of ramen, whole, the styrofoam cup, paper top, the dried noodles, everything. Would sprinkle the packet stuff for seasoning, but everything else he consumed was dry as dirt. He also bit into oranges and bananas like they were apples, peel and skin and all. It was fascinating watching this man deconstruct an entire grapefruit. He once brought a bird to school, not like a parakeet or anything, like a straight-up grackle that is everywhere. He kept it in his shoebox and his beat-up backpack and would ask people, "Hey, want to see Tweety?" and pull out this box covered in leaves, seeds, and birch with the bird in the middle. He was eventually caught by a teacher and told to let it out, and he let it go in the courtyard, but the bird never flew off. It was probably injured or something. This dude was also into parkour, but kind of awkwardly so. We lived in a suburban area surrounded by a lot of country. He'd still manage to climb whatever he could though, like he'd be seen on random people's roofs, would try to jump over people's slowly moving cars in the parking lot, and would climb up trees and jump down to surprise people from out of nowhere. He also, of course, climbed the school tower, and when the admin unlocked the base to climb the 4 flights up to get him, he had already scaled the outside water pipe down again. Kyle was weird, but he wasn't a bully. One time we had this race thing explode when a kid who was kinda bullied exploded at some black guys, calling them N-words and monkeys and etc. Like straight racial epithets to everyone, regardless of who were there, right in the middle of the cafeteria. It was about to be a dog pile when suddenly Kyle straight up splashing water at this dude while yelling, holy water, goddamn boy, you need Jesus." It was so insane that it hesitated everyone long enough for the admin to break everything up and separate the racist kid. Kyle essentially saved the bullied racist kid from getting beat down by causing a bigger scene. God damn it, Kyle, you are a legend. Story 14. I was in a Christian high school at the time. The day before winter break rolls around, and I had packed a few Toblerone chocolate bars and some notes for the teachers I most appreciated, with the intention of leaving them as a Christmas gift. Before school, the principal made a public announcement that students were not to give any teachers any gifts unless we were going to give all teachers the same gift. This was obviously a bit of a problem since I couldn't exactly come back the next day with additional candy bars, so I marched into her office to address this issue. Upon entering the office, I made a show of opening a chocolate bar and breaking off exactly one piece and placing it on her desk. I told her that I was going to give her a full candy bar, but I now had to share her chocolate bar with other teachers that I didn't really care so much about anyways. That rule was quietly lifted. Story 15. During my senior year of high school, 2008, my school got super strict about cell phones. It got to the point that we weren't allowed to have them out at any point in the day, not even during our lunch period. They claimed that we would send each other test answers or something like that. Anyway, a friend of mine who was a year below me was tired of the rule and how rude teachers were when enforcing it. He literally looked at his phone to check the time and got it taken from him for the rest of the day. That next week, he comes to lunch with 2 older, non-functioning flip phones. He takes the first out and pretends that he's talking to someone on it. A teacher is instantly on him. They walk over and hold their hand out for him to give it up. He looks at the teacher and then proceeds to break the flip phone in half and puts it in their hand. The teacher was speechless. She just walked away without saying anything. He takes the second phone out and does the same thing again. The second teacher thought it was pretty funny. Flash forward to 2015 and I start working at the school as a student mentor. And now everyone is allowed to have their phones out pretty much at any time. Wow, how things have changed. Story 16. I remember schools being strict about phones, and whenever mine was taken, which only happened the first few times I used them in classes, my mom would usually ask the teacher what would happen in the case of an emergency if I needed to contact her or vice versa. For the harder ones, she would imply something along the lines of, "And what if it kills my child?" Later giving it back to me and saying, "Don't get caught next time." Just so y'all know though, she is a teacher for the kids who need the most compassion now and has done high school too. Intelligent lady, MIT, whatever. She wasn't just trying to burn the teachers, she was also the one who suggested a workaround in our school system where tardy slips en masse were punished harshly and being absent for a class wasn't, so she suggested if we were late to just not go to that class and go to the next one. Story 17. I have a similar story with strict cell phone usage. The school has no problem with it, but actually encourages technology usage in classroom. If you are distracted by cell phones, then you aren't trying to learn anyways, and it is the teacher's job to teach the students. Banning cell phones won't help. Anyways, we had this one crazy teacher that just went against the school on everything. Even when the school encourages teachers to implement technology into their classrooms, this teacher is still using the whiteboard, taking up half the class writing stuff only for us to write it back down onto our note sheet instead of using a PowerPoint presentation or printouts, or letting us type out our notes and always erases it before we could finish saying we were too slow and he had to move on to cover all the materials. He also takes students' cell phones, even if it's just laying on the desks, on our backpacks, or in our pocket bulges. If he even sees a charging cable, he would ask for our phone. Since I have about 20-ish smartphones at home, different story, I brought some of them in along with my 2 laptops, 1 netbook, and 2 tablets to his class. I took notes on my laptop, and as he took that away, I pulled out my other laptop, then my netbook, tablet, and 3 cell phones before he sent me to the principal's office. The principal thought it was pretty funny and walked me back to the classroom and asked for all my stuff back. I was moved out of that class and avoided him for the rest of the year. Story 18. Here we go. So in high school, I did the morning announcement with 2 other guys in front of a green screen every Friday on camera. We chose the background. We were given a lot of leniencies because this was in the early 2000s when technology was a little more simple. In the AV room, we controlled every TV in the high school of over 1,000 kids. When Christmas was close, we were told, don't do anything Xmas related because not everyone celebrates it. So the last announcement before the holidays, the screen comes on and in the background there's a sleigh ride video and the 3 of us pop up and yell, "Merry Christmas!" as loud as we can and dressed in Christmas costumes. Now again, the school cannot turn this off, only we can. It's just so happened that the superintendent was in the building that day, saw the video, and freaked out. It turned into this whole ordeal and we were almost suspended for 3 days. They stopped letting us do the announcements until there was a petition signed by the school to let us do it again because we were actually pretty funny and most of the gags we pulled were innocent, like eating cream corn out of the can in less than 10 seconds if enough cans were donated to the food drive. When they let us come back, they said we couldn't make jokes and we had to have a neutral background, so we went forward with our plan. When the announcements turned on for the first time since our near suspension, we had no background, just a green screen. I and the other guys just wore white t-shirts. We read the announcement without as much winking, minus the occasional moan. It would be like, today for lunch the school is serving, pizza, serving pizza. At first it was minimal, but at the end of it, it sounded like we were having a mini orgy. We read the last announcement, said goodbye, and then started acting like the announcements were over and like we didn't know we were on camera. We stood up in our boxer shorts and walked off camera. After about 10 seconds, our buddy Scott stood up from under the table, wiped his lips off, took a big swallow, and walked off of the camera. That time, we were suspended.